everyone has those games in their past that are extremely underrated to them, but nobody else really knows about them, and they think they're the best, and other people just have no idea. So let's get into some of our personal underrated classics. We've got 6 here, but I think we've got a few honorable mentions at the end as well, that we just want to get off our chest and sort of talk about as games that I think a lot of people either know about and just don't give the respect they deserve, or have no idea even exist. So I guess you can start off the list with one of yours, and then I guess we can just go back to back.
Sure. And I'll try and I'll sort of dip right into real old school game called Jersey Devil. It's actually a PS1 game that came out I think in 1997. Essentially is a platformer by a small original developer that was called Behave, that then kind of became Megatoon Studios, part of Ubisoft and part of a THQ Crystal Dynamics, but basically it's a small Behavior Interactive, which is a very small company at the time. They basically made this game as a Jersey Devil was essentially I think a type of bat or something that basically lives in or some kind of creature that lives in these old school kind of areas. But basically it's just a really funky game. I mean, you probably see some clips on the video now of it. There's like this little purple devil character that basically is genetically mutated, and you kind of going across the city which has been infested by this evil Dr. Knarf's evil mutated pumpkin head things and all the rest of it. But it's just the whole thing. I don't know how to describe it. I mean, from everything from the soundtrack to the sounds to the feeling, and it was a really hard game. It wasn't a platformer for kids, really. It was hard. There was a real difficulty level to it. But it was just really, really fun, a really good story, and some really intense levels. GameSpot gave it 5.2 out of 10, and it got 3 stars from a lot of other reviewers, but actually I thought it was always a lot better than what it gave credit for, to be honest.
Yeah, I remember it. So I was pretty young when that game was a thing. But even I remember it. It had a very sort of Halloween-y sort of vibe. I don't know how else to sort of describe it. It was very with the pumpkins and the sort of the bats and that sort of thing. Very, very memorable, I think. So if nothing else, I think people will probably recognize it, even if they don't necessarily know what we're talking about straight away. I think if they see an image of it, they'll probably recognize it from some time or another. It's definitely a very memorable game. So the next one on our list here is one that's definitely it's not necessarily underrated in terms of because it has a cult following. There's a lot of people who do recognize that it's pretty underrated, but in terms of the mainstream, a lot of people haven't played it or don't know what it is, and it's getting kind of old now, so it's sort of past the time where a lot of people will be able to try it. But that's Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. This is pretty much canonically the best vampire game there is at the moment. It's just sort of held back by, I think, a pretty rushed release. I think there are a lot of troubles with bugs and things like that, and it came out at the same time as things like Half-Life on PC. So it sort of got buried under a lot of sort of instant hits and cult classics, whereas it itself sort of fell into that second place where a lot of people sort of either brushed over it or just didn't get to see it. But definitely a really, really good RPG where you can sort of pick from a different clan of vampires and sort of level up your skills in traditional RPG fashion. But those skills are different depending on what sort of clan you picked. So you can have sort of different vampire powers. I think some of them can do pretty crazy things like control people's minds, and other ones can do more sort of violent things like make somebody's blood boil and explode. So always pretty fun playing a sort of powerful vampire. Pretty immersive as well. I remember when I played it, there's a lot of segments that are really, really cool. Sort of you can do them stealth, and you can do them sort of guns blazing. You can even spec into different weapon types. So as a vampire, I think a lot of people maybe don't see vampires as someone who would wield a gun, but you can straight up just use a gun if you want, and just completely ignore your vampire powers and just guns blazing your way through all the missions if you want to. So definitely to those of you who recognize the name, which I'm sure everyone does, but haven't played it, definitely give it a try on PC. The only thing I can suggest, since it's pretty old now, is definitely get like one of the unofficial patches or something, so that it's not quite as buggy. Because yeah, definitely rushed releases ruined that game a little bit.
Yeah, maybe. I didn't play that game too much, which is probably goes into that underrated atmosphere, I think, around it as well. Alright, so next one from me is a Rockstar, even though it was kind of a Rockstar release, although it was Team Bondi in Australia that made it, was it got plenty of fanfare when it came out in LA Noire, but I think it was very quickly dismissed. I think a lot of gamers didn't really, what's the right way of explaining it? I didn't really understand it, like it didn't really work for them, because it wasn't really a true Rockstar game in that sense. Like it didn't have that, it has that open world feel, but it didn't follow that pattern, right? Like it wasn't you could go and do whatever you wanted and mess around kind of open world. So I think people really struggled with the concept of it, but it was really, if you looked at it as like an episodic style, it was like a TV series, but in the format of an interactive game, where you could sort of, you could look for clues and solve cases based on what clues you found and whether you think the person's lying or telling the truth in, kind of interrogations. It's pretty good. Some pretty revolutionary graphics, I think, made it kind of ahead of its time, if honest. Because you look at a lot of games that have been coming out in recent years, it's all about interactive, isn't it? It's all about choices. It's all about, acting in games and games as the new medium for storytelling. And so I think that LA Noire, the history will look back at LA Noire and saying it was actually very pioneering. It just came too soon, I think. And so when it got re-released on PS4, updated version, I was hoping that it did better, but it still didn't do amazingly well, which is a shame, because I think that this was a series that would be fantastic. I mean, I love the noir setting, for starters. I think it's really, really cool. That kind of noir era detective genre was pretty cool. But everything was great. Great acting, good story, I think, very good serviceable story, decent graphics for what it was, and the action was basic but still fun, in my opinion. But the real fun part was just exploring. It was walking around these old 1940s houses looking for clues. I thought it was great.
Yeah, I felt like it's definitely one of those games that's gotten even some negative attention in terms of like a lot of the memes, and I feel like it doesn't really do it justice. Seeing some of the clips out of context, like they might look funny out of context, but in game often they kind of fit in and it's fine. And I think using another example, Mass Effect Andromeda kind of had that issue as well, where I think obviously I'm not really saying the games are comparable, but I think Andromeda kind of just got put into that meme tier of game where people would play it like as a meme rather than as a game that's actually like okay. And I think in LA Noire's case, it's not just okay; it's actually a pretty good game. I think just a lot of mainstream sort of like reviews and like YouTubers sort of put it on blast a little bit and made it into a bit of a meme tier game, even though it really shouldn't be. I think it's actually a pretty cool story, pretty cool game, and definitely should be what the future of games are. Like you say, it's a really good sort of episodic, almost like a show in the form of a game. Like you said, it really it should be the future of what games are, and I think maybe that's the sort of thing we'll see more of in the future. But at the moment, I think LA Noire is definitely really underrated game from Rockstar.
Well, when we did our first, or when I did my first playthrough, was with our mum and dad, and I think you were younger, so you would have probably gone to bed already, and we would play essentially one of the missions, if you like, one of the cases, each night, or as much as possible, and it would take about an hour to 2 hours of game time each case. When you thought about everything and considering the questions that you asked and looking for things, it would take about that long. So it was almost like watching a TV show each night, just an episode of a TV show. That's literally how we played it, and I think it's perfectly weighted to do that, where it's a nice break after the almost, in some of the cases you're almost a little bit stressed and a little bit worked up, you actually worry, and it's actually not easy to find the right. And part of it is in the story, without any spoilers, in actually determining who is the guilty party. Like, it sets you up one way, but then it turns out that actually maybe that was wrong, and that's one of the really good things about the game. It's quite a brilliant game, and as I say, I think people looked at it to be a GTA or a Red Dead style game, and it just never was going to be that. And look, it wasn't made by Rockstar; it was made by Team Bondi. But you think if Rockstar take it on now with their team in house now, because Team Bondi are gone, and maybe like a NY Noire or something like that, they could really turn it into something, and maybe add in the same elements that it's already got, but add in with some of that Rockstar style, that GTA style. Maybe it would turn it into one of the greatest of all time.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's got a real potential for the future, and I hope they revisit it. But for now, it sort of remains as an underrated classic. The next one on this list is one that I've selected, and this is Age of Mythology. And I think everybody knows. I think even you've played Age of Mythology. You got me into it back in the day, a long time ago now. But I think everybody knows Age of Empires, and it's sort of seen. Age of Empires is seen as like one of the big real-time strategy games, easily one of the most popular, and definitely for a good reason. I think the games are really, really good. But I think definitely Age of Mythology is sort of a spin-off title. I honestly liked it more. Maybe I'm a bit biased because I sort of love those mythology, like the characters and the monsters and stuff like that. But I liked it even more, and I honestly feel like as a spin-off game, it really sort of surpassed the original series. And sort of became its own thing, and even so much so that not that recently now, but a few years ago, it even got a new DLC, which was like a whole China expansion with like the Chinese mythology like faction, and it wasn't great, but like it's still pretty cool to know that at least the game exists. Like they know it's a thing, and I really hope the game gets some more popularity. I hope they release an Age of Mythology 2 or something like that, and sort of bring back some popularity to that side, because yeah, definitely Age of Empires gets all the love, and I think while it is really, really good, I think Age of Mythology was honestly really, really cool and very, very underrated.
Agreed. Yeah, so it's quite a special game, really. I think it was, I originally got into Age of Empires in a very early 2001 time, playing sort of a LAN party game with a friend of mine that is in his basement, believe it or not, in his mum's basement. It was fantastic. We'd play these all day games that still wouldn't have a victor at the end of it. It was, something really quite special. And then Age of Mythology came around, and it was like, how can you make Age of Empires even better? Well, you add in some of the mythical beings and creatures, and actually Age of Mythology has like a campaign mode as well, which is kind of cool, where you're the Atlantis, the Atlantean people, which is also quite cool, if you ask me.
Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, it takes you through like the different like mythologies as well. Like you start in Greece and then go to Egypt and then end on like the Norse mythology. I think that's pretty damn cool, honestly.
Yeah, I mean it's just really, really good. Really, really good game. Well worth it. And graphics are one of those graphics that will never age, because it's not designed to be state of the art graphics. It's serviceable, isn't it? And it's, it is what it is. So
well, it got the extended edition update on Steam for anybody who's interested. It's the graphics are exactly the same, basically. It's just the lighting is a bit more up to date for like the newer systems. So,
well, I definitely recommend you to do me a favor, because I have a Mac. I need you to do me a favor and find out exactly how I can get it to work on my Mac, because I'm game.
Yeah, I'll have a look. Yeah, because honestly, one of my favorite games of all time, like, and really, really underrated. I don't know what to say, like, other than that. It's really, really, really cool.
Very good. Right, so my third kind of underrated game that sort of, especially these days, is a game that was always mentioned in the same breath as Grand Theft Auto, and I think some of that was fair, some of that was a little bit unjust, which is the Getaway, and its subsequent sequel. The Getaway was basically a sort of open world sandbox game set in London, very much amongst one of those kind of classic London sort of gangster, like Cockney sort of mobster sort of settings. It sort of had some elements of like your classic sort of Guy Ritchie movie or London gang movie elements, but I mean, that aside, it was this attempt at being more grey washing and more realistic rather than Grand Theft Auto, which was always more sort of comedic and over the top, which had its own political kind of messages too. But this one was more, gritty, I guess. And you start in the first game was Mark Hammond, who basically has his wife and kid kidnapped on him, and has to basically come back in and carry out some jobs for this gang for this crime boss in order to see his family again. It's pretty good. It ticks off. I mean, graphics wise, it came out in 2001 when Vice City came out, so it's like Vice City level graphics, but a bit more crisp than that, to be honest. But you can imagine it's not like today's AAA standards by any means. But they went for real cars and real car models rather than GTA, which went for cheaters and all the rest of it, which is fine. But and they got into a lot of trouble, I remember, because there was a mission where you had to like steal a BT, which is like which is a phone company in England. You steal a BT van and do some crimes in a BT van, and they had all of that, like the red buses and all the rest of it, the black cabs. It was really good, but it was a solid serviceable story, a good amount of freedom to roam around London into real places. It was a real map of London, and things like when you got shot, it wasn't just a case of being able to, in certain games, as you do, you just recover and the blood's gone. You would have to find a wall to lean up against and hope no one would come and shoot you again, and you sort of recover that way. There was no map, HUD map. It was when you were on a mission, if you were driving, the car's indicator would indicate right or left when you needed to turn, which was really, really cool. And then the second one, you actually controlled two characters. Graphics, it came out in 2004, I think. Graphics were really well done. You controlled two characters. One was a police officer this time, and one was a criminal, and how the stories sort of converged on each other, and actually was probably even better than the first one in terms of story and well thought out and a bigger map and everything. And then that was it. We never heard of these games again, which was a real shame, because I thought it was potentially going to be the start of a really good franchise.
Yeah, it's something you've talked to me a lot about, but honestly, again, it's one of those games where even I, as a pretty avid gamer, haven't really had the chance to play, and there's no sort of modern like remaster or anything like that. Like, it's kind of just fallen completely to the wayside and under the radar. And I think you're right. It's one of those games where it really should have a shot, almost like a shot at the title of GTA, where it has a chance to sort of rise up in the modern era. But as of right now, I don't really see any information about it. Does it even have a cult following at the moment? Like, do people...
No, nothing.
So it's just fully gone. Yeah. That's honestly the worst. I think, at least with some of the other games we've sort of talked about on this list, they've at least had their own dedicated fandoms. But yeah, it's kind of sucks.
I mean, the second one came out, and here's the sort of reception. And look, there are obviously some criticisms of the game, as there are to any game.
Of course. But
it's just a little bit. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely love Rockstar, as already mentioned in this video. But Rockstar get tens no matter what they do, it seems, and other game developers really seem to struggle with and it just proves to you that the critics and the IGNs of this world actually mean nothing, I think. And I think the sooner people just ignored them, the better. But just to give you an idea of the reception of the second one, Metacritic gave it 57, so that's an aggregator out of 100. Okay, so it's Edge gave it 3 out of 10, EGM 6 out of 10, Eurogamer 5 out of 10, Famitsu 30 out of 40, which is probably the better rating, Game Informer 7 out of 10, GamePro 3 stars out of 5, Game Revolution a D, GameSpot 6.4, GameSpy 2.5, GameZone 6.7, IGN 6.5, OPM US 2 out of 5, Detroit Free Press 2 out of 4 randomly, and a Sydney Morning Herald 2.5 stars out of 5. So it's what you would call a middling. Now, I personally haven't played it for a very long time, the second one. I actually played the first one more recently, but that was already like 15 years ago. But if you ask me, I mean, those scores are too low, considering what it actually was trying to achieve, and in some cases did achieve. I think that if it just had maybe bigger funding, potentially even, and maybe a version, like it was all on PlayStation 2, by the way, as well. So, there's 2 generations ago in terms of when it came out. I think that if we saw a version come out and be done properly, in this day and age, I think it would be a runaway winner, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I just hope there's a company, like hopefully the company who made it is still has it on their own radar, and hopefully I don't know, hopefully it gets revitalized or has like a revival project or something like that. Yeah. But I guess for now it's definitely
Interestingly, the first one got a lot higher scores, so the aggregate there was 72 out of 100 rather than 56, so it did a lot better. And in terms of sales, I think they said the first one sold 4 million copies and the second one 2 million copies. I mean, that's still a good amount, and as I said, it did pretty well. And then they said that they were going to make a third version for PlayStation 3. That was this rumor back in 2008, a third one, and then in 2009 it basically said they were not cancelled but on hold. But I think that the game developer, if I'm not wrong, is just kind of gone. So it was part of Sony Computer Entertainment, Team Soho, and I think they're finished now. I think they finished up. Yeah,
so it's definitely
So the guy that was creative director on a guy called Brendan McNamara, he actually was the one that founded Team Bondi, that went on to make Noire.
That's interesting.
I'm only finding this out now, by the way.
That's pretty cool.
I've just randomly put 2 of his games on this list. He also made, by the way, another one which I was tempted to put on this list from 1997 on PlayStation called Porsche Challenge, which was literally just a racing video game where every car, I think, was a Porsche Boxster, if I'm not wrong. So it's the same car, which you'd think would be boring, but actually it was pretty good for what it was.
Yeah, fair enough. Maybe that guy, instead of his individual games, maybe that guy should have just been the one on the list. Just him as a developer, like he is the one who's underrated.
Yeah, well, along with I think so. But there you go. I almost put 3 of his games on this list. And then also another one that he did was something called This Is Football, which back in the day was a really good football game, like a rival to FIFA and all the rest of them. But in any case, it doesn't look like there's anything else going on with it, and doesn't look like there's any calls for it, which I think is a real shame. What I would, at the very least, like is if they did a modern remaster, at least, would be pretty good.
Yeah, I think that would make a lot of sense, like a modern sort of revitalization, like just a remaster or a full new version would be pretty cool. But yeah, a remaster would definitely be a good way to sort of bring the series back. But I guess with that, I'll go on to my last one, and then we'll go into some honorable mentions. So my last one here is the Yakuza game series. Now this one definitely does have a cult following as well, but it's also one that is sort of a bit more popular these days. It's sort of coming to the point where I can't really say it's underrated anymore. It's similar to some of the other games on this list. It sort of reached like a meme tier where I think a lot of people started playing it almost as a joke and posting like memes about it, and now it's just kind of come full circle, and now it's actually like kind of popular. So I feel a bit bad putting this on an underrated list, but I think it spent a very, very long time. It's a pretty long-running series, since like in the 90s, pretty much. Barely being known, but now I think it's sort of at the forefront, which is always really good. In sort of as a description of the game, it's basically just a Japanese version of Sleeping Dogs, if anybody's played that. I think a lot of people have. Very, very popular games, Sleeping Dogs 1 and 2. I think there was 2 of those, wasn't there? I think Sleeping Dogs. Did that have 2?
No, I think there's only one. But
or is there only one?
I believe Sleeping Dogs was the second one of another series, which was True Crime: Streets of LA. I believe.
Okay, yeah. The reason why I'm confused is because there's like a definitive edition of Sleeping Dogs, which is like a completely separate, like rather than like a upgrade to the other game, it's like a whole separate release. But yeah, it's very much like that, but set in Japan and involving the yakuza as like the sort of the gang. And it's really, really good, pretty awesome story, and surprisingly, very memeable, and that's why it's sort of come into popularity recently. You can do some pretty ridiculous stuff like karaoke, even when you're playing as like a yakuza, like thug, you can still just go into like the bar and do like karaoke, or go like, you can go bowling, you can do like the baseball, like I don't know what you call them, like the rinks where they shoot the ball, shoot the balls, and you just hit home runs. Pretty memeable game, but really, really fun, like for real, rather than just as like a meme. And I think it's definitely sort of a good way to round out the list as one that is sort of getting the recognition it sort of deserves now. I think a lot more people are starting to play it. Whether it's ironically or legitimately, I think it doesn't really matter. I think the game's definitely more in the mainstream now, so I think that's pretty cool. And I guess to end off, we can have a look at some of our honorable mentions, if you would like to go through some of those.
Yeah, I think so. I want to mention, first of all, Days Gone. Another one where I think you just don't listen to the critics. I thoroughly recommend you give it a try. It is a PlayStation exclusive. And again, the aggregator for Metacritic gives it 71%, although on Google reviews it gets 93%, which is obviously directly from actual people that have played it. So that kind of speaks for itself. But it's this one's all about character development and the characters. The gameplay is not bad; it's serviceable. The graphics are beautiful, are fantastic as well. The story is not necessarily strong, but it's all about the character development. The main character of Deacon he's like a biker who's part of a biker gang in like Oregon, which is a beautiful setting for this sort of a game anyway. And he sort of found himself a wife, and then now the wife, it looks like, is dead, so he goes to visit her grave, and no spoilers, but it turns out, and I haven't finished the game yet, to be fair, so I don't even know, but it turns out that she may actually not be dead after all, but we don't know that yet, in terms of where I'm at in the game, at least. It's open world as well, but it's really into that survival style, so you wouldn't just ride around for the hell of it, because there's a very good chance that you might, come unstuck. It's pretty easy to die as well, or to get destroyed. And what's worse than dying, where you can load it, is getting destroyed and basically losing your weapons or your ammo or some kind of useful resources, which is really good.
Yeah, fair enough. It sounds like, I guess maybe one of the reasons why it's a little bit underrated is just because there's a lot of other zombie games, but I guess by the sounds of it,
it sort of came out towards the end of that craze. But if you actually take out the zombie component itself, and there's a lot of human stuff in it, and survival stuff and horror stuff, but it's good. I think it's good. I think it's a good game. I wouldn't call it, I wouldn't call it a game, a show-stopping game by any means, but it's a good game, and I very much recommend anyone to give it a try and to be open-minded with it.
Yep. The second honorable mention we have here is just Dragon's Dogma. I don't want to say too much about this one, but I feel like this is a game that's actually been, in recent times, kind of lumped in with games like Dark Souls and stuff, and I think it, seeing as it actually came first, I believe, I think it came out before even Dark Souls 1 did, it's got a lot of the same sort of ideas in that a lot of the bosses can be quite difficult, and the sort of monster encounters aren't like some of the other RPGs where you can kind of just like brute force your way through. A lot of them require you to like, for example, like a Cyclops, you have to sort of climb up on its head and stab it in the eyeball to sort of do maximum damage, and I think that's pretty cool. But even besides that, I think it's got a really cool world. And a lot of the monsters are based on sort of mythology. So as I said, like the Cyclops, but there's also like the Chimera is in the game. There's like a big ass dragon. All the sorts of thing you'd want for a game that's kind of physics based, where you can sort of like run and jump and climb on the climb all over the monsters and cut off some of their limbs, like their tail. In the case of the Chimera, you can kill each of the heads individually, so you can like cut off the snake head, kill the goat head, and then defeat like basically what's like a normal lion by the end, which I think is really, really cool and unique. And it's one of those games that I don't see enough people talking about it on its own. It's kind of lumped in with games like Dark Souls at the moment, and I think that's a little bit unfair. But on the bright side for this one, it looks like they're doing like an anime, a Dragon's Dogma like anime series, like a small, like a short one. And then I think after that's done airing, I think they've got like an announcement planned for a potential sequel. So I'm definitely that's one of the ones that might be worth looking out for in the future. I think it's going to go pretty high, and probably won't be considered an underrated classic for too much longer. So we'll have to see, though. We'll have to see on that one.
Yeah, I think this one thing I will say on it is that it's a class. It's got a lot of great elements like that, and as you can imagine, plays very well, and quite a unique idea for the time. I think it is a concept that we've seen a bit more of over the years, and having, you know, some sort of online elements to it as well, which was pretty good. It was really, really good fun, and I'm glad that they finally did the like an updated version a couple of years ago.
The Darkness Arisen or whatever it's called, with all the DLCs and some new content.
Dark Arisen, yeah.
Dark Arisen, yeah. Yeah, really good game. Definitely check it out as well if you guys haven't already.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a really underrated game as well is the original Assassin's Creed game, the very, very first one with Altair. Definitely not underrated on this channel, but underrated in the wider world. It seems to be that people forget about it and say that the Assassin's Creed 2, the Ezio games were where they were at, and I can see why they might say that. Because the Ezio games were very, very good. Let's not forget, this is the game that had the hype. This is the game that put them on the map. And I think that whilst the Ezio games were really, really good, something about the character of Altair and his redemption is still, a story well told for me.
Yeah, Assassin's Creed 1 is probably one of my favorite Assassin's Creed games, like probably top 3 for me. So that just goes to show, considering, right after Assassin's Creed 1, you have the sort of Ezio trilogy, which everybody, it is fantastic, but everybody knows it's fantastic. Whereas I think it sort of overshadows the first game, despite the fact that the first game really did lay the groundwork and did a lot of the heavy lifting for the Assassin's Creed franchise. And I think it's easily one of the best in the whole franchise to this day. And holds up pretty well. I think the graphics are actually still pretty good, surprisingly. I really do think they hold up, despite the fact that they were kind of going for realism. I feel like games that go for realism eventually get kind of outclassed, but I still think Assassin's Creed was really like at the forefront, and it still holds up, I think, to this day as a pretty damn good looking game.
Very much, yeah.
And just on the final one here for honorable mentions, this is another sort of Rockstar title that I guess got kind of swept under the rug based on the popularity of GTA, but that's Bully. Pretty much just GTA, but at school. You had to do stuff like go to your classes and whatnot, or you'd fail, and going to the classes would get you different skills and stuff like that you could use around the school. Even though it was like a GTA at school, it was still pretty brutal. Like, you couldn't outright kill people like you can in GTA, but you can do some pretty ridiculous things. And I just felt like it's one of those games where it's just a really, really fun sandbox. Most of the time you just spend just messing around, not even pursuing the main quest, just using the world as a stage for you just being a psychopath, if that's what you want to do. You can just do whatever you want. I think a lot of people will know about the game, but I think it's definitely it's kind of fading into obscurity. I think Rockstar have probably sort of forgotten about it, and maybe don't even intend to follow up with a sequel. But I think I think there's enough people out there who would love to see another one, and I definitely think it's really, really fun. So it'd be pretty cool if Rockstar followed up and sort of brought Bully back as one of their mainstay like franchises.
It was really, really good, and I believe there's also an iOS version, if I'm not wrong, which is
there is. Yeah, it
fun.
got ported, I think.
Yeah, which is definitely worth it. So yeah. Well, guys, if you've got any underrated games that we haven't mentioned, it obviously proves that they are definitely underrated. There will be some that we've not mentioned because we don't think they're underrated, rather that they are rated. And there are some that we may have just missed that you think. Let us know. And of course, see you in the next video.
Yep, see you next time, guys.